Someone can do the sound in the meantime. Chaya? Okay. So we're starting a new Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos. Thank you. The Pirkei Avos begins with, so as you saw, as we had in the previous booklet, the Pirkei itself was in the beginning. We have the sheets that go into the details. Rabbi says, whenever it says, what does Rabbi mean? Rabbi, everybody's a Rabbi. All the rabbis are rabbis. But whenever it says in Gemara, Rabbi, without a name, it's referring to a specific rabbi, and he's known as Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Yehuda, who was the Nasi, he was the leader of Jewry in his times. And he also has a third name. He's called Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy rabbi. And even though there's so much to say about him, but what he's known for more than everything and anything else is that he's the one who compiled the Mishnah. In other words, it was him and his Bezdin of sages, of rabbis, that even though the oral Torah until that time was only allowed to be studied orally, it was actually a prohibition against writing it down, and that's why it's called the oral Torah. It was passed down from Moshe to the scholars in that generation, and the prophets, and they passed it down to the next generation, and every teacher of Torah gave over the information orally. The first time anything in the oral Torah was transmitted in writing was done by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and or Rabbeinu HaKadosh, or Rebbe, these three names, that's what he's known for.
Rebbe?
Yes.
Did you say the second name slower?
One is Rebbe.
Yeah.
I can't say that slower.
No,
I know.
The
Okay.
third.
The second name is, well, I don't know, second or third, but one of them is Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi.
The other one?
Rabbeinu, our Rebbe. Rabbeinu. In Hebrew, that would be spelled Reish, Beis, Nun, Vov. Rabbeinu, which means our Rebbe. HaKadosh, the holy, our holy Rebbe. If you would paraphrase that in English, it would be our holy Rebbe. Like Moshe is also called Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our Rebbe. But here there's an additional word, Kadosh, our holy Rebbe.
And when did Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi live?
When did he live? So the Gemara was completed about 1,500 years ago, and he completed this probably about 1,750 years before that, probably, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So by the way, when he did this, only the Mishnah was written down. The discussions, explaining the Mishnah, the arguments, what it means, all this was continued orally. And then, like I said, about 250 years later, the rabbi saw that the Golus is getting worse and people are beginning to forget. So then they they ruled that we should also write down the interpretation to the Mishnah. From that point on, there were no more any limitations. Anything that being taught in Torah should be written down so people won't forget it. So he said the following, which is the right straight path that a person should select for himself. And obviously, if a Torah observant Jew asks us a question, it raises a question. What do you mean, which path? The path of Torah, that's the path to follow. So of course, what he's saying is, within Torah itself, there are many paths. There are different ways of how to serve Hashem, and different paths in terms of what do I emphasize, what do I focus on, what's the best way to go about it, and the order of things. So in terms of that question, in the Torah itself, what's the best path? He gives an answer. And the answer is, Kol Shei Teferes La'oseha, a path which is honorable for the one who takes it, and it's also Teferes Le'min Ha'adam, and it's honorable also for the fellow man. We're going to elaborate on this more tomorrow. I'm going to give you out some sheets, I'll hand out sheets from the Rambam, but what he's saying is something very, very fundamental. And that is, someone might follow a path in Torah that for them it's a positive thing, but it might not be positive for others. Sometimes for others it's a positive thing, but it's not like positive for you. The path which is the most sort of the best path to follow, or as it says here, the smoothest path to follow, straight path, is a path in following Torah in a way which you're following the middle path. And the middle path is something which would enhance your life and enhance other people's life. To give one example of what we're talking about is we're going to study Rambam, where he discusses the idea of not taking things to an extreme. When you take things to an extreme in one way, or things to an extreme in the other direction, something is going to be missing one way or another. For example, tzedakah is a very big mitzvah. And according to Allah, you're obligated to give 1/10 of your earnings for tzedakah. Then the Gemara says that if you want to go beyond that, you can give up to 20% of your earnings for tzedakah. And there's a person who wants to go beyond that and give more tzedakah, as much as they possibly have, whatever money they have, almost give away almost everything for tzedakah. So that's something which is very good for the recipient. They're getting more money. But for the person who's giving away that money, it's not a positive thing, because they're undermining their own source of income and their own sustenance, and their wife and their children are suffering because of that. So it's not a good idea. Someone comes along and says, yeah, you're right, you got to take care of your own family first. And therefore, they hold on to their money very tightly and very rarely distribute money to tzedakah for everybody else. That might be good for you, you're having more money for yourself, but it's not good for the people who are in need of tzedakah. So what's the right way? The answer is the middle path, something which is balanced, and in that way it'll be good for the recipient and it'll be good for you as well. That's what these words mean. Kol Shei Teferes La'oseha, it brings beauty and enhances for the one that's doing it, and also for the ones that are receiving, the ones that are around you. And those that are familiar a little bit with Chassidus, what Chassidus says about the attribute called Teferes, that's exactly what Teferes is. Chesed is something which is more on the right, Gevurah is something on the left, and Teferes is actually the merging of two different energies in a balanced way. But like I said, tomorrow, when I have those sheets, we'll be able to elaborate on this more. Then he goes on with another statement. Havizor b'mitzvah kala k'b'chamura. Be careful performing a minor commandment, just like you're careful performing a major one. Because einat yodeya, you don't really know matan schar shel mitzvah. You don't know the true reward for mitzvahs. And on the surface, the words almost seem to contradict itself. Why? Here you're saying you should observe the minor ones like the major ones, and then you say that you don't know which is minor or which is major. So is there such thing as minor or major? Should all mitzvahs be sort of related to equally? And how do you measure what's minor, what's major? So again, on a very technical level, the way we measure minor and major is by the consequences. In other words, if it says in the Torah that if someone does this and this, commits this and this sin, it's punishable by the opposite of life, that makes it major. If there's another sin where the Torah says, don't do this, but if you do, there is no consequences, that makes it minor. And even in the consequences are different levels. Some things are more harsh than others. So the technical way of measuring what's minor and what's major is by the consequences. On the other hand, the Mishnah says it shouldn't affect the degree of your dedication and your enthusiasm to do the mitzvah. You should observe all the mitzvahs equally. Because the truth is you don't really know the true reward for mitzvahs. I don't want to make too many detours on the way, but this itself needs an explanation. Are the mitzvahs because of the reward? It's not because of the reward, it's because this is something Hashem told us to do. So let's look at the next line, again about reward. It says, Rabbi Majeski hefsed mitzvah keneged schara. A person should always consider the loss that they're going to suffer because of a mitzvah. Consider that against the gain and the benefit you're going to get from the mitzvah. So, for example, if a person says to himself, if I decide not to work on Shabbos, I'm going to lose money. My business is going to be closed one day a week. I'll lose money. Or I might even lose my job if I don't work on Shabbos. So say to yourself, if you would know the reward for keeping Shabbos, you'll see that it's infinitely greater than anything that you might have lost. And that will give you the encouragement not to do it. And the same as with the reverse. When a person is thinking of doing Avera, something which is prohibited, so they're thinking, but by doing it, I'll make more money. By doing it, I'll have more pleasure. I'll have entertainment. I'll have something which I'll enjoy. So the Mishnah says, think about it and measure up and weigh the reward of the Avera, what you're going to gain, compared to what you're going to lose by violating Hashem's Torah. And you'll see that what you're going to gain is insignificant compared to what you're going to lose. And therefore, it doesn't really pay. So, even though Torah is not about reward and all that, but I guess the Mishnah is speaking here to us and telling us, what can I, so to speak and say to my own Yetzer Hara if he gets on my case? In other words, of course I can tell myself, this is what Hashem said, don't think about anything else. But what if your Yetzer Hara is telling you, go for it, you'll make so much money, you'll get so much, you get a high position in government, you'll get a high position in the company, you'll gain this, you'll gain that. So of course I can say to myself, but this is wrong, but sometimes the Yetzer Hara and the temptations feel like too much and too strong, and I don't feel like I can stand up against it because I'm looking at what I'm going to lose. So therefore, the Mishnah tells us, even from that perspective of the reward, think about it, and you'll realize that the reward for doing the right thing is infinitely greater than whatever you'll gain from doing the wrong thing. Years ago, there used to be a Lubavitch Yeshiva in Newark, New Jersey. And when I heard from one of the people who lived there that there was a Jewish couple who owned a bakery, and they weren't observant. They were both from the old country. They came to America and they established a business. They were doing well. And it was in the 1960s, there was a blackout, which means all electricity came down. Something went wrong with the main power, and it was dark. And unfortunately, all the criminals who are sort of waiting for such an opportunity came out of the woodworks, and they broke into stores and they burned down stores. They stole things. So many people had tremendous losses, and his store was destroyed. And so, let me back up a little bit. He had a daughter, his only child. They got married late, and maybe they even went through the Holocaust. They got married late. They had one daughter, and she was older and getting older and older. She wasn't getting married, and it was very, very painful for them. So there was a rabbi who lived there, his name was Rabbi Gordon, and he suggested, why don't you go to the Rebbe for bracha? So they came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said that if you close your store on Shabbos, that'll bring you more blessing in your life, and this blessing could be fulfilled. It was very difficult for them. This was their source of income. Shabbos turned out to be their best day in the week, and they weren't ready to give it up. So they didn't do it. They came for a blessing, but didn't know that I would also give advice. So they didn't do it. Then going back to where I was up to, there was this blackout, and there was all the stores, including theirs, were destroyed completely. And now we had to invest a lot of money to rebuild the store. But he was at an age where a year or two later he'd be retiring. So he decided to retire early, close the shop. 6 months he closed the store, his daughter got married. And then put two and two together, and he said, I don't believe it. And of course he said, if I would have known that by me closing store, she's going to be able to find her shidduch, I would have done this 10 years ago when they ever told me to do it. But at that point, obviously he didn't get it. But let's say he would know then for an absolute fact that this will bring the bracha that he and his wife are craving for, of course he would give it up. So by the moment he thought, here I'm gaining money, and he didn't see what he was losing. That's what the mission says. You'll be losing more than you'll gain. And the same is with other things. So if I need to speak to my sort of animal soul in a language that they can understand and they go for it, so you explain how the reward you're looking for will come through the Torah and it'll be greater than the reward you get the other way. Then comes another part of the Mishnah. By the way, these parts, at least on the surface, they're separate. Each one's a separate statement that's supposed to be Torah wisdom and inspiration. But of course, you'll find commentators that look to find a reason why all these things are put into one Mishnah. But on the surface, this is a new statement. Histaka b'shleishet dvarim. Every person should look at three things. When we say look, we don't mean physically with the eye, it means with the eye of the mind. Focus. Think about these three things. And you will never come to commit any sin. If you look at these three things, that'll prevent you from committing any sin. What are the three things? This is still part of the introduction. Be aware of what is above you and who is above you. And then these three things will strengthen you. First of all, ayin raya, there's an eye that sees. Everything we do, there's an eye that sees everything we do. The second thing is oizen shamas, that's the ear that hears everything. And the third thing is everything we do, all our actions are written up in a book and they're recorded there permanently. And it's known that when these new inventions came out, like radio or television, the rabbis in that generation, which was not that long ago, were all saying that this is an amazing, amazing thing to help us with this Mishnah. Just like years ago, if you tell someone there's an eye that sees, how can an eye see me from miles, thousands of miles away? Today, we're all witnesses to the fact that you can be in a room right now, you're on Zoom, and somebody thousands of miles away could watch you and watch every move you make, every nuance you make. In fact, you might be in a place where you think you're hiding, the doors are locked, the windows are locked, no one can get in, no one can see anything, and yet there's a camera in the room and you could be seen by people who live thousands of miles away. So it's only a muscle, but it helps. Understand that I'm talking in one place and my voice could be heard thousands of miles away by tens of thousands of people. It makes it easier for them to understand that Hashem could hear everything we say. And therefore, if I have that awareness, it would definitely stop me from doing what I'm doing. I once saw an article, it was an interesting article, that this girl in college was selling you know what it was, bagels or cookies, selling cookies. And she had put out a box. I wrote on the box, each cookie is 25 cents. And at the end of the day, she got about 50% of the money came in, which means if she put down 100 cookies, at the end of the day, she had 50 quarters, not 100 quarters. She decided to do something, and she made a sign again for the cookies, but this time on the sign, she made a pair of eyes looking. Just a picture of eyes looking. It went up 25%. Instead of 50 cents, 50% of the money, she had 75 quarters in the box, which means that psychologically people saw eyes looking as if someone was watching, they put a quarter in the box. So imagine, if we all know that Hashem is watching, but we're lacking in that awareness. Anybody who believes in Hashem would believe that Hashem sees everything, but we're not really totally aware. And if we would make ourselves aware, that would prevent us from doing things, aware that Hashem hears. And then there's a third thing, where people think, well, I know Hashem knows everything, He sees everything, maybe this one will slip away. So, but it says that everything is written down and recorded in a book. And again, we have today a invention which is called video. And whatever someone did even 50 years ago, you can watch every movement, everything they did. And that means that nothing, chas v'shalom, escapes Hashem. Everything is there. And again, if I would be aware of that, that would make me at least think twice before I do something. The story in Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the leader of Torah in his generation. And a lot that was written about him. He lived to the age of 120, like Moshe. He lived in the generation of the Beis Hamikdash that was destroyed, the second Beis Hamikdash. And he's considered the one that, after the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, it was like a Holocaust. It was just devastation. He's the one who brought Torah back by a whole system that he set up, that Torah should be spread and make yeshivas. Anyway, before he passed away, at the age of 120, his students were standing near his bed, and they said to ask him, give us a bracha. So he said, I'm giving you a bracha that you should have fear of God like you have fear of people. And they were very disappointed. That's all. God should be so much greater than fear of people. So he said, it's a very good bracha. And the proof is when somebody does something, they're always thinking, I hope nobody's watching me. In other words, if I would know, if there's actually a human being watching me with a pair of eyes, I would definitely not do a lot of things. So if you're aware, if your fear of Hashem would be as real as fear of people, it would prevent you from doing averos. So I want to say that the average Jew that believes in Hashem, a Jew who observes Torah, believes in Hashem, of course they believe that Hashem is watching. But I think if you ask the average Jew, are the things that you're doing that if people would watch you, you would still do it? They have to admit the truth. No, a lot of things I wouldn't do. I wouldn't fly off the handle like I do, especially if the one that's watching me is someone that I respect. My teacher's watching me, or a chassid would say the Rebbe is watching me, I would act very different because he's actually watching me. So if you believe in God, and you believe that God is watching everybody and everything, and He's so much greater, so how does it make sense that you're doing what you're doing when you know that He's watching you and you believe that He's watching you?
You're talking about like for bad things though, not like, oh, I wouldn't want to do this because it would be embarrassing to. No,
we're talking about negative things. Negative things. So the answer is there's believing and there's believing. You know, simple expression is believing and there's really believing. You might remember we spoke about this when we spoke about the subject of Mashiach. That is a belief that's, you believe it, but it's a little bit aloof. It doesn't really register in a very solid way. But something that you see with your eyes, that belief is very concrete and very solid. And the example that I gave then is that there are a lot of people that couldn't get themselves to stop smoking. And one of the methods they get them to stop smoking is when they, and it happened to many people, they see an X-ray or whatever image of a lung, what a healthy lung looks like without smoking, what a lung looks like with smoking. And a lot of people, after they see that, forget it. Or if God forbid they have a relative that got sick because of the smoking, forget it. What's the difference? You didn't believe the doctors before? No, but now I really believe them. What does that mean? It means once you see something with your eyes, something visual, whatever you see visual is very real. And it connects to us in a very real way. Things that are not visual, even though I'm aware of it, I know about it, it doesn't have that same impact on me. So therefore, what we're saying is if we can visualize that Hashem is watching me, like a human being is watching me, Hashem hears me like a human being is hearing me, if a person would think about it and really bring it to his consciousness often enough, that would definitely prevent them from doing something which is inappropriate. Okay, so what was that?
No, you said so I was saying that
Yeah. The first page was page number 1, which talks about the middle path. I'll leave that for tomorrow because I want to study the Rambam and see what he says about this subject. But page 2, we have a few minutes just to go what it says on page 2. This Mishnah on page 2 is telling us that there are commandments that are sort of major and those that are minor, and we should observe them both equally because you don't know the rewards. So there's a few other statements that are similar to this. One is number 1, Habizar b'mitzvah kala kibachamura. That's the statement of our Mishnah. So number 2, it says, Al tihi yoshev v'shokel, don't sit and weigh the mitzvahs of the Torah, because you never really know. It's the same idea, but it's a different quote. You'll never know the real value of one mitzvah and effect, and especially how it compares to another mitzvah. There's so much going on that's beyond our comprehension. Number 3 is where it says, Avirotz the mitzvah kala, which means run even to do a light mitzvah. We know that there's a place in the Torah, in a number of places where it talks about doing things bezrizos, getting to it quickly, not to procrastinate, not to delay, which shows that you're excited, and therefore you run to do a mitzvah. In fact, it even has ramifications in halacha, that if a person runs through the street and knocks somebody over or breaks something, they're obligated to pay, they're liable. However, there are cases where we look at it differently if they were running to do a mitzvah. In that way, they sort of have the permission to run. And it's different than a person who's running just on his own. So you run to do a mitzvah because that shows that you're excited about the mitzvah. So the Mishnah says, this is also in Pirkei Avos in a different place, run to do a light mitzvah, no different than you run to do a major mitzvah, because it's all mitzvahs of Hashem. The number 4 is another quote that relates to this, and that is there's a parsha in the Torah, in Deuteronomy, which is called Akev. Akev means because you will listen, so on and so forth. There's another interpretation to Akev, brought down in Rashi, that Akev means a hill. And the Torah is saying that you'll be observing not only the mitzvahs in general, but also mitzvahs that people trample upon them with their heels. In other words, there's certain mitzvahs that even though they're mitzvahs like all other mitzvahs, but for some reason or other, people don't pay attention to it. People dismiss it as if it's not a big deal. And even though the truth is, it's not the case, it's not really true, but that's where people are. So the Torah recognizes and says, when you observe mitzvahs in a very good way, what's the good way? That even those mitzvahs that other people normally trample on them, you'll make sure to observe them and observe them properly. even if you think of an example of something like talking in shul while they're reading the Torah. Can't imagine what it says about how disrespectful it is. It's like, this is what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. It's like someone is sent by the king to read something to the community, and while they're doing that, we're having a conversation about something else. But nevertheless, for some reason or other, it's one of those mitzvahs that people they take it lightly. So we see there are differences in mitzvahs in terms of people's perception. But the Mishnah telling goes, in reality, we should perform all mitzvahs equally. Why? To be continued tomorrow. Make sure you come back.